OCP pioneered cyborg technology, and now we take a quantum leap forward. State-of-the-art destructive capabilities commanded by a unique combination of software and organic systems. In every way, an improvement over the original. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you RoboCop 2.
You are under arrest. Stop or I'll shoot.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Overly Critical Hyperanalytical Movie Club podcast. It's me again, your boy Wolf, and I'm joined by Maddie.
Oh, hello.
As well as AJB.
Me is trouble. Hi,
also,
guys.
Andrew. Andrew, for those who don't know the acronym of him.
AJB.
Again, we're joined by the other co-host from the Superhero Stuff You Should Know podcast, our brocast, our sister brocast, Ben Wan.
You should have just called me The Other.
The Other has arrived.
Joined by The Other.
And we're coming to you from old Detroit and the former OCP headquarters turned Jamba Juice. How are your juices, guys?
Good.
Pretty
I'm
good.
actually allergic to fruit, so I can't have a Jamba Juice, and it's really pissing me off.
Is that true?
Yeah, you don't remember this conversation we had back in the day?
Actually, yeah. It fucks him up.
Yeah.
I do remember
Your
that.
throat closes up. You can just eat bananas sometimes, right?
No,
Right.
none of it.
None.
Cantaloupe and
Wow.
stuff, but
Do you
Raisins?
remember the taste of fruit?
no, I don't.
Just in candy.
Oh, man.
That's why this
Anyway.
episode sucks. I gotta sit here and drink this fucking Jamba Juice because they sponsored it, and I'm fucking dying over here.
You can run over to the Starbucks at the former OCP laboratories if you'd like.
Oh, I
Can
do.
it be
I do need
ICP
myself
Laboratories?
A cold brew.
Did you say ICP?
Yeah, Insane Clown Posse, dude.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with what we're about to
Insane
talk about.
consumer products. What? Anyway, on today's episode, we're going to continue our coverage of the RoboCop franchise and dissect the inner workings of its somewhat disappointing sequel.
It's
Somewhat.
gonna be a great episode.
Hard emphasis on somewhat. I still enjoy it. Hard emphasis on somewhat. To get it out of the way, my sources for this episode are the RoboCop archive articles by Jody Duncan and Dan Persons, RoboCop wiki at fandom.com for the RoboCop 2 film, RoboCop 2 IMDb page, and interview snippets by Paul M. Salmon, who was the on-set, behind-the-scenes videographer who asked a bunch of really annoyed crew members and actors a lot of deep questions they weren't ready to answer. However, to know more of what I'm talking about, just go on YouTube and look up Making of RoboCop 2. Some of that bleeds into here. And without further ado, RoboCop 2 is a 1990 sequel to the 1987 film RoboCop classic, directed by Irvin Kershner of Empire Strikes Back fame. RoboCop 2 sends the cyborg into an even more violent world as OCP begins its hostile takeover for the birth of Delta City, and there's a new narcotic designer drug called Nuke, distributed by a murdering psychopath called Kane. So before we get started into the meat of this, how do you guys feel about RoboCop 2? Go ahead, Maddie.
Ooh, I don't like it.
Like, at all?
There's some moments. I don't know, man. To me, it's not like RoboCop 1. You know?
Okay, hold on. Before we move forward, an addendum to that question. How many indeeds do you give RoboCop 1 and how many indeeds do you give RoboCop 2 within your answer?
Oh, okay. So RoboCop 1 indeeds. 10 out of 10. Duh. RoboCop 2 is like a 4 out of 10 indeeds.
Oh, wow.
I just don't find it as
Significant drop.
enjoyable.
Okay.
Like, I feel
fair
like
enough.
it was, to get through it, I was like, I don't really care about anything anyone's going through. I don't like the main villain robot. I think it looks dumb. I mean, I love me some Tom Noonan.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's creepy, but I just think he's like wasted in this movie as a villain.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the little kid. It's like unnecessary. So
Fair
there's
enough.
just like
I
a
hear where
lot
you're
of
coming from.
choices they made that I just don't care for.
All right. How about you,
But it's got
Andrew?
RoboCop.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, he's the best part of the movie, obviously.
Yeah.
How about you, Andrew? Indeeds for Robo 1, Robo 2. How do you feel about Robo 2?
Give 1 a solid 9.5.
That's a 10 out of 10.
And I give this one maybe like 6.5. A lot better than Maddie, I think.
All right.
I'm surprised you disliked it. I think this movie falls into a trap a lot of movies at that time did with the sequel, where I think it's technically better.
Right.
Technical aspects of it, like the way they
Sure.
made the suit, the action sequences, I think are a little better. And in some ways, not all of them, but I think that there's something, I don't know, there's something tighter about it technically. But it is like totally missing any. I know it's weird to call it the human element in a robot story, but you know what I mean? Like
For sure.
The first
That's
one
valid.
has him like going through trying to find his wife and going down memory lane and all that. And they really just don't give a fuck about this one, about that in this one. And they
Right.
really like the kid is silly. Like it does make it super silly, but it's, I don't know, if you just take it like you're watching kind of an action comedy, I think it's fine. I don't know. It didn't bother me probably as much as it did Maddie, but I don't think it's the best choice they could have made in the world either. And the lead villain robot, I think, I don't like really skinny legs on a top heavy body.
Just so terrible design.
All right.
I don't like
Very
that. I don't mind.
academic criticism. All right.
Yeah, and I was thinking whenever I was watching it, you guys complained about in Logan where you had a villain that looked too much like the hero. Well, he was a
Right.
clone, really, right, or
Right,
whatever.
yeah,
It's exactly like him.
Yeah.
Exactly like it.
Pretty
And
close.
I was watching this for the first time, so I was thinking that it was
Right.
going to be something similar. So maybe as a plus, it's cool that he looks so different from RoboCop. But I don't love the design, but it's okay. And I guess that's it. I think it's overall a slight thumbs up. It's just like it kind of ends with "we're only human," and it's just like, I don't know, nice button up there, Frank Miller, but it's not enough, man. Like that you're missing him finding his humanity story arc entirely. Am I wrong?
No,
And I'm done.
You're correct.
No, you're right.
Let's see. I first saw this when I was growing up because of the Frank Miller connection, and I knew he was doing year one of Aronofsky, and I found out it was going to be on TV again. If you guys remember the first RoboCop, it was I first watched it on TV, so I saw this one again. So I also saw the sanitary version before I saw the actual real one on it. I don't even remember the stuff that they bleeped out, but yeah, I'd say I agree mostly with the scores. So I'd say RoboCop 1 is right about an 8 or 9. RoboCop 2 is like a 5, so I'm like maybe in between 5 at the most in my mind. But yeah, I mean, I agree it's a downgrade from the original, and also agree with Andrew about the fact that his whole story, especially the stuff with his deal with his wife, is just like, all right, let's just do it in the first 10 minutes, and then, which I thought was really powerful, really great, and then they just forget about it for the rest of the movie. It's just not even a thing anymore. And then at least the finale in the original RoboCop was satisfying because of the fact that he was getting some sense of revenge, but this one is just kind of like, let's just have him in a fight with a big robot, and that's it. Like, it's as if they wanted a big fight with Ed 209 in the first one, but they didn't do it, so they're like, let's do it for this one instead. And also, RoboCop 2, the robot itself, just to jump on that, never really felt like an upgrade. It just felt like a bigger and clunkier, and I'm like, well, what happened? Like, at least in Terminator 2, like, you could get why Robert Patrick was an upgrade. Because it's like, oh shit, he's like a shapeshifter and everything, and he's sleek and he can infiltrate way better than clunky Arnold. in this,
Yeah.
so you felt the threat of it. But in this one, I'm just like, that doesn't look like an upgrade. That just looks like, an even more fucked up Ed 209. I don't know. It's just, it never really worked for me. I think I agree that Tom Noonan was wasted. Kane is no Boddicker, and Noonan is way better as a villain and creepier as a villain in Manhunter.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Okay, cool. What were your Indeed measurements?
First one I gave like an 8 or 9. This one I give like a 5 at the most.
Okay, word. Right on. I personally, I give the first RoboCop, I crank the Indeed box to 11 on that one, for sure. RoboCop 2.
Tap that shit.
Yeah. RoboCop 2, I will say, like a 6, I think. I really enjoy pretty much everything about it except for the story and the characters. You know what I mean? Like, the effects
Minor
are
shit
great.
like that.
The cast is great, but, the majority of the premise and everything is pretty weak. I think the action is good. The new RoboCop costume is a little bit sleeker. It's a little bit lighter. You can tell that attention or an easier solution to that because they'd worked on the first one and kind of realized their mistakes from the first one or their limitations, and probably had a bigger budget too, so they were able to put more money and effort into the new suit. But overall, yeah, it's a big drop. So moving into our dissection of what makes this film tick, this episode I'm calling RoboCop 2: The Creative Wars. But we're going to talk about what could have been, and then we're going to move on into what actually was, and then we'll go from there. RoboCop, the first RoboCop, a massive success, grossing more than $50 million domestically, and rightfully so. The creative team behind the first film brought a lot of talent and creative force to the production. Even amidst the grueling conditions of filming, the core themes and visual concepts were masterfully executed. Rob Bottin may disagree with some of this, but that's okay. And for the record, most of these this time are my own words. I did copy paste some stuff, but it's not Drew Taylor's dissertation as much. But thanks, Drew Taylor, for your help on the first episode for IndieWire. But most of these are most of them are my words. Anyway, Orion Pictures approached producer John Davison about doing a sequel almost immediately after Robo 1 smashed at the box office. At the time, Davison was scheduled to begin work on Dick Tracy and was unwilling to touch the project without a fresh take or a new approach to the RoboCop saga. He declined any interest to be involved, stating, "Initially, I said no. I just didn't have any ideas for a new RoboCop at the time, and I was already involved with Dick Tracy. So I told him to do it without me."
Uh-oh.
So Orion decided to move along without him and promptly hired RoboCop writers Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner to begin work on a treatment for the sequel. When the writers turned in their first rough draft called RoboCop 2: The Corporate Wars, in which the opening scene saw Robo arrive to stop a group of would-be bank robbers from entering the bank using a truck-mounted cannon. After Robo ices out all but the last of the thugs, who, with his last bit of energy, uses the military-grade cannon to blow Robo to smithereens. Only then the film picks up 25 years later in a futuristic society of megaplexes controlled by an AI known as the Neurobrain. Robo would be unearthed by the cronies of a corporate guru named Ted Flicker, who would use Robo as a pawn in a massive corporate conflict. The AI would be modeled after a scientist's dead wife and would be a love interest for RoboCop. What do you guys think of that?
I already want to watch that movie.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I don't know about the time jump for me personally. I kind of
Fair
like
enough,
that the
yeah.
sequels still had, the Sergeant and Lewis in them.
Right.
And the old man at OCB. Like, the similar characters. I'm just
Definitely.
I kind of, sure, Robo's the most interesting character out of those, but I like the world that he was in. So for me, I'm like, I don't know about that one either.
Right. I like the shock and awe that they're attempting here early on to kind of shake things up and be unpredictable for a sequel. But yeah, that time jump, even though I think it would have still been a cool movie, I love me some Lewis and Sergeant Reed. You know what I mean? Even the old man has a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
So without those...
Don't forget Johnson.
Johnson, yeah. I know. He seems to weasel his way out of everything throughout these films.
He gets increasingly more evil through each movie.
Yeah.
The first one, he's just like, let me give Robo a thumbs up. And then by the third one, he's just like, stay with your jobs.
Yeah, totally. So we'll talk more about some of the details of that the first version as we go along. The writers compiled their rough ideas in the treatment with the cover page that read, "The authors wish to apologize for any errors in judgment and or lapses of grid logic in this very rough draft."
I wish I could put that on the cover page of every single script I write.
No, it's a very writers kind of quote there. Grid logic, creative as hell. Anyway,
Logic.
that should be the name of a sequel, RoboCop 2, Grid Logic.
Grid logic.
Sadly, their first initial draft was met with less than enthusiastic response from executives who were keen to fast-track production with a given deadline of December 31st, 1987 for a completed first draft of RoboCop 2, not even a full year after the release of the first film. It's kind of nuts, man.
Oh, shit.
These producers be chomping at the bit, huh?
It was that 80s cocaine.
Yeah, which we talk about extensively in our previous episode.
Ain't nothing like that white lightning, baby.
White lightning. Some of this material from the Corporate Wars treatment would show up in the 1994 RoboCop pilot, and would be praised by fans as it seems the basis of this story worked well with the characters and gave life to the short-lived series. In 2019, it was announced that Neumeier and Miner's rough draft would be the basis for RoboCop Returns, an alternative sequel to RoboCop that ignores RoboCop 2 and RoboCop 3. That's pretty cool. I think we talked about that a little bit last time, but hopefully that's still the case, because then we still have a chance to see some of this corporate war action go down. With the original writers involved, Orion courted producer John Davison again and to solicit his involvement in the picture. He recalls, "By that time, Dick Tracy had gone to Disney and it was Warren Beatty's movie all the way. I'm sure I would have been able to contribute, but RoboCop 2 was an opportunity to do my movie, to have a lot more input that I would have on Dick Tracy. So I left that project and RoboCop began to interest me again." Miner and Neumeier had some seemingly radical ideas they wanted to achieve and clashed with the studio over creative direction, which led to requests for massive reconceptualization of the story. According to Neumeier, the first film was successful because it was a whimsical relationship with the audience, sometimes a rather nasty relationship. Sometimes it was really out to fuck the audience, which is something they intended to carry on into the sequel. Which, yeah, that attitude really worked well for the first film. You see little bits of these motifs kind of turn up in Robo 2. They try a little, but not very much. With Davison on board again, the writers were apparently making some headway on their revisions, yet with continued revision requests by studio heads made them decide to drop out of the project entirely and go write a completely different film. At the time there was, they were just like, fuck it, fuck Orion. Orion did seem, behind the scenes here from what I've read, they did seem to like just not be willing to compromise with being patient or, I guess it was the white lightning, it was the money involved. It was fearing that the property, much like Ninja Turtles 2 that we talk about in the superhero stuff podcast, I suppose there's this worry that the property is going to fizzle out or something.
What they need to understand is that as fans, we are patient. We will wait for greatness.
I know. I don't understand ever why people get upset over like delays and things. It's like, at least there's that. At least it's not like, well, we're still going to do it and it's releasing like right now. And it's just like, what the fuck is this? At the time, there was a writer strike in effect which prevented the studio from hiring any new writers. Davison's production company, Tobor Pictures, was able to sign an interim agreement with the WGA, Writers Guild of America, which allowed him to personally bring on a new writer. Director Paul Verhoeven was also approached early on and expressed interest in coming back for the sequel, but with the loss of his collaborators from the first, quietly declined involvement. According to Verhoeven, he didn't want to make the kind of sequel that the studio had in mind. He says, "Originally, after the first one, the studio immediately wanted a sequel, and the writers, the producer, and myself all felt like we needed more time to find something innovative again, instead of cashing in on what was there. But the studio were so impatient they dropped the writers, and so I decided to abandon the project. So they proceeded anyhow, and the results basically were never at the level of the first one. I saw it just for the sake of knowing what was happening, but I was not even disappointed because I thought the studio completely underestimated the talent and the art we used to make the first one. I still feel the ideas we had for the second one were highly superior to what was done afterwards. Definitely.
He was in the right.
Yeah, definitely.
Looking back.
So heading into pre-production on the film, having been a fan of the acclaimed comic series The Dark Knight Returns, Davison felt the writer and artist Frank Miller would be the perfect person to take on writing duties and could deliver the level of edge required to make a successful sequel possible. Davison commented, "I like its humor, the politics, the dark edge, and the inventive action. Frank seemed like the ideal choice, and luckily, he wanted to do it. Miller was fascinated by the character and went into it enthusiastically." That's pretty cool. Yeah. At first,
His first foray into Hollywood.
Yeah, especially The Dark Knight Returns seems like it shares a lot of, I guess what he's describing as the edge or whatever. There's a lot of really interesting personality that both these properties share. I think that Ben was kind of touching on in the last episode.
Yeah, and then there's also just a couple, like, the DNA strands of Dark Knight Returns sort of show up here, whether it's just like, RoboCop in the hostage situation in the beginning, as well as just the whole the mayor trying to negotiate with the gangsters, that type of stuff is still like in both sort of things. So like you can kind of see the connection there. I can see how they were like, this looks like a good guy for RoboCop.
Yeah, and perhaps Dark Knight Returns was a little, not in a bad way, but kind of derivative of RoboCop in certain ways, because there was a lot of little snarky news snippets and stuff in Dark Knight Returns as well.
Well, that was before RoboCop 1, though.
Oh, was it? Okay, my bad. Timeline fucked up. But yeah, that's cool. It shares, like you said, a lot of the same DNA. Miller was hard at work when Orion mandated a summer 1990 release. From the time the production was set in motion, Davison was left with less than a year to produce a film that had not been written. It's cold-blooded, Orion, you mother truckers.
Yep.
Although the producers loved Frank Miller's original version of the script, they quickly realized it was unfilmable as written. The final screen version was heavily rewritten and bears only a superficial resemblance to Miller's story.
What was unfilmable about it, as far as what you could gather?
I think it was just that it was his first time writing a screenplay for a big Hollywood movie.
Well, was the script that he wrote for the comic that Ben and I both read?
Yeah, apparently that was it. That was the screenplay, yeah.
Well, I can understand why it was unfilmable then. There's a lot of shit in it.
Yeah, it's... When I first heard about, they heavily rewrote Frank Miller's stuff for the movie, I'm like, okay, I can kind of see it. Maybe it'd be cool to check out. And so I was really excited to ever, read the comic. And then I read the original comic of it, and I'm like, I like the movie better.
Yeah. In 2003, Miller's screenplay was adapted into a comic series titled Frank Miller's RoboCop.
So the comic book's not great.
Comic book's not great either. You can see certain strands from that made it into the final movie, but there's still, it just doesn't feel like it would have worked either.
It's got some interesting bits, but where the comedy in RoboCop 1 really kind of works, it's satirical, biting satire. Some of the comedic elements in Frank Miller's draft and ultimately the comic it's pretty spiteful. It's pretty hateful kind of jokes, it's mean-spirited.
I got a feeling Frank Miller wrote, "We're only human."
I don't remember that being
probably not. That was probably actually Irvin Kershner's input, to be honest.
Maybe so. It's too uplifting of a line. He's like the Fincher of comic books in a way. Like he's kind of usually really dark, and his fan base loves the shit out of him. But for me, for both of them, I only like a little bit of what they do. I'm not like an insane Fincher guy, and I'm not I don't know. I think Dark Knight Returns is cool, but just not super into Miller for some reason. Bold statement there, I guess, but that's just me.
He's a fairly divisive creator, he's had some really on point cultural hits, but at the same time, he's had a few projects that a lot of people don't really tend to talk about. There was one indie comic he wrote and drew about a Batman kind of knockoff who fought terrorists.
Yeah, the Holy Terror.
Yeah, the Holy Terror. That's what it is. And it was a little bit right leaning, for whatever it's worth.
Oh yeah, he is right wing, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a little fringy right wing.
There's also a bit of this. There's like this weird sexualization of Lewis, which was like against what Verhoeven
Lewis
wanted. in
and
the first
Dr.
one.
Fax, yeah.
Yeah,
Lewis,
and I was
yeah.
like I don't.
They're like
okay,
bombshells all the time.
yeah. Not just how they're drawn. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
mostly how they're drawn, but still, like just the way that
Yeah.
other characters leer at them and stuff. I'm like, I don't.
So
see
when
this
it
happening.
when it goes from an educated Dutch person over to American that likes dark shit, you get
Yes.
these
Yeah.
varied
That and-
interpretations
that and the,
of Lewis.
That and the continued obstacles that they faced in production of this film just really lent to like a lot of confusing rewrites and a lot of stressful creative meetings with many of the people on the crew.
Like the RoboCop, the Frank Miller RoboCop comic ends with Robo kissing Lewis.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah,
Okay.
doesn't make any sense. Not that either of them don't deserve love, right? But
And she slowly ends up losing
buddies.
clothing through that entire comic
Exactly.
book.
was
I
like,
know she
ugh.
her battle damage is like a strip tease that is like drawn out. It's
And I
Oh,
absolutely
Frankie.
I hate the main robot in the comic too because he's just too black. It's like hard to read like how he's drawn and like I don't know. It's too bulky for me. But I love
That's
the
racialist.
artist who drew it. I think is great. He's got like
Yeah.
a Frank Quietly kind of
right.
like over
Yeah, he
the
does.
top style, and I think it's
He's like a-
amazing.
He's like a Jeff Darrow, Frank Quietly kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah,
like
reminded me
he
of
drew
Darrow, too.
more scantily clad women than he actually drew Robo in the comic. I was like, God, this
I agree.
comic's about RoboCop, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of a lot of even the comic book and the movie, like a lot of things feel like they kind of just come out of nowhere, a little bit out of place. But
Yeah.
definitely the Avatar comics published the Frank Miller comics, and at the time they were churning out books, man, and they would, the comic book industry was very like male centric, and pretty much
Oh, yeah.
every female hero was a stripper with machine guns. So
Did this come out in the 90s, like 91? This
Uh,
comic?
the comic actually came out in 2003, but a lot of the
Oh.
ideas and the stylistic choices by Avatar Comics were based very much off of like the 90s sensibility.
Yeah, if you remember, like the 90s, like Lady Death, Danger Girl,
Right,
Dawn, all these like basically in
Witchblade.
lingerie, Witchblade, all this shit. Vampirella, that might
yeah.
be a little bit older, but just like this representation was, it was male dominated. Let's just put it
Yeah.
that way.
The landscape's a little different now, not probably as much as it could be, but it's quite a bit different, which is good.
Yeah.
The studio liked many of the ideas that Frank Miller had, but gave him a hard deadline to come up with a full screenplay, which they felt he felt he was unable to meet. Verhoeven also moved on to shoot Total Recall at this point, so he was completely out of the picture. With the absence of Verhoeven, Davison sought out a director he thought could pull it off. Eventually, Davison hired newcomer Tim Hunter, who had just made a splash with his provocative debut River's Edge, starring a young Keanu Reeves in his first feature film role. Davison was impressed by his work and paired him with Miller to complete pre-production on the film, saying, "I thought River's Edge was terrific. Tim is a very realistic, naturalistic director, and that is what makes fantasy pictures work. I thought he would bring a lot to the material." Tim began working with Frank, and in fact, he was the one that came up with the story point of the foreclosure of Detroit, which I really liked, which actually was a bit of foreshadowing because Detroit did claim bankruptcy much later on. But anyway, I'll drop that tidbit, Robo Nugget, later. He also brought on veteran action writer Waylon Green, known most popularly for his work on The Wild Bunch, to help Miller shape the script. As production seemed to finally level out and things began to progress, the production then met with another crucial setback. Director Tim Hunter suddenly bowed out to the dismay of Davison, who then had to scramble to find a director at virtually the last moment possible. Davison states, "I think what scared Tim off was the fact that the picture had to start shooting because of our locked-in release date, and yet the story hadn't completely been licked yet. The release date was staring us in the face, and Tim was worried that there was just enough time to get the script the way he wanted it."
I'm sure that was like in all the Starlog magazines back in the day too. Like, they got the Wild Bunch writer. It's gonna be fucking incredible.
Davison turned to veteran director Irvin Kershner, saying, "It was a tough situation because anyone I approached would have to go into the production knowing there was not a hell of a lot of time for his input. I was thrilled when Irvin Kershner said he would do it, especially since he has turned down a lot of pictures in recent years. I thought his Empire Strikes Back was the best of the Star Wars movies. I met him on a Friday, gave him the script, and said, if you want to do it, you're going to have to let me know right away because we start on Monday. Luckily, he called me right back and said he would do it."
Wow.
It's pretty tight, yeah.
Nice.
Seemed like
Dang, someone needed a paycheck.
I've got some credit card debt.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
He
he must
like
have.
woke up and was like, "Oh shit, I haven't directed anything since Empire." 30
yeah.
I've spent all that Star Wars money, baby.
So
That's
on
another Starlog entry that just
Right.
made the fans go fucking nuts back then.
Oh my god, like RoboCop 2 is gonna be
I mean,
better
if you heard
than
that
RoboCop.
now, you'd be like, "Oh my god, it's gonna be so good."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Using artificial intelligence, director Irvin Kershner resurrected to direct RoboCop Returns with original script
Kevin's-
intact.
No, well, at this point, I'd go, "I don't know if that's a good idea."
Yeah.
And then
Someone else to do
it'll
this.
come full circle because he'll be like Robo Kershner. He'll be like a cyborg, dude. And he'll be like, what, dude? Art imitating life.
Dead or alive, you're doing this take.
Yes.
Kevin Smith talks about whenever they announced Keaton was Batman in like 87 or whatever. He said there was no internet back then, but the internet exploded.
Yes.
He said it was just in nerd circles it was fucking insane.
It's like an audible fuck that carried across the wind.
Yeah. yes.
But that worked out, so...
Yeah.
So in terms of casting, Peter Weller returns as lovable cuddle muffin Robo. There can be only one, right? Only one
There can
Robo,
be
right?
only one. Oh wait, different.
Oh, shit. Nancy Allen reprises her role as the tenacious badass officer Ann Lewis, and another stellar, although brief, performance by Robert Dupuis as Sergeant Reed, with Dan O'Herlihy in his final turn as the Old Man. Remember, we were scrambling to figure out what his name was for the last one. It was the Old Man.
Told you it was the old man.
Omni Consumer Products President and CEO. Yeah, you were right. Moving
See
quickly.
the guy with the long arms?
No,
No,
that's,
no, that was Dick.
That was
I love that guy. I need to
was
release a McFarlane toy of that guy
Specifically from that shot.
from that shot with long arms. It would sell. I swear to God, it would sell.
Drop him from your stairway at any point.
I'd probably snap it up. Farlane toys are great. Anyway, moving quickly, Davison had to fill other key roles. Wonderfully weird and nuanced actor Tom Noonan was cast as the sadistic yet charismatic gang leader and drug kingpin, Kane. And an interesting tidbit about Tom Noonan that I learned from the making of RoboCop 2 jumble that I found on YouTube was that this motherfucker gets on set and he doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't try and make friends. He doesn't try and share anything. He comes in to deliver everything possible towards his character. And he stated that he feels that it can be distracting to form friendships and things on set from his performance.
Some people are like that, I guess, man.
Yeah.
You know,
He hits his trailer. He gets his craft services alone. He sits in the corner and he's perfectly happy not to talk to your fan boy ass.
some people just view it as a job. Like it's like a blue collar mentality in a certain way. Like what's his name? Johnny Ramone viewed being in the Ramones as like just a job, and he was just going to cash out and retire whenever he was like 55 or whatever. You know what I mean? People just look at it like this way. Apparently, Penn and Teller are not like super best friends. They just go to work together. You know?
Interesting. Kind of like us, huh? Just kidding. Just kidding. What were
There's
we
a
gonna say,
story
Ryan?
about Robert Mitchum too, that he would just be like hanging out with like people and chatting them up and stuff, and they're like, "It's your it's call time," and he'd be like, "All right, time to go to work," and he would just like bust out his lines and be like, "Job's done, boom." Then he'd just like go back to partying and stuff. And it's like,
I feel like that's how I would be.
he's like, yeah,
White
it's my
lightning,
job. It's what I
baby!
get- Yeah, he's like, it's my job. It's what I get paid to do.
Yeah, I could see that.
I just found that really interesting, and I mean, I love Tom Noonan too. He's great in pretty much everything he does. Great actor. He's directed a film that I have not seen yet, which apparently is really good, about two lonely New Yorkers. Cool dude, but yeah, I found that interesting. Kane, along with his cohorts who peddled a new and highly addictive drug called Nuke. The gang, respectively played by Galen Gourg, who I just found out has died. She's she's the curly-haired black woman who's very pretty and pretty cool. She died, 55. Anyway, Michael Medeiros and a young Gabriel Damon in the roles of Angie, Katzo, and Hobb, as well as the pathetic and bumbling corrupt officer Duffy, played by character actor Stephen Lee, with Willard E. Pugh as the crooked mayor Cusack, and Australian actress Belinda Bauer was cast as misguided psychiatrist and RoboCop saboteur Dr. Juliet Fax.
Nice. Galen Gourg apparently was under consideration at the time by Frank Miller to end up playing Elektra.
Yeah. He offered her the role on set, but my guess is he was trying to hit on her. And
Probably,
I'm a big Hollywood writer now. You're perfect for Elektra. And she's in interviews, she's like super bubbly and stuff, so she was probably flirty to the max. But also, she would have been pretty good.
She would have been awesome,
Elektra,
yeah.
maybe.
She would have been way better than Jennifer Garner.
Oh, right.
Oh shit!
Oh, we forgot about that.
Yeah.
Lest we forget.
True that.
Also thought it was interesting that Nuke is the name of the drug in this, whereas Nuke was the villain in Daredevil Born Again.
Mm-hmm. With
Also
Frank
by
Miller and
Frank Miller, yeah.
David Machiavelli came
shit.
up with the new character. Yeah, so there's a lot of that, like tons probably of that bleed over. On the effects side, many of the effects team from the first film were brought on board, including original RoboCop designer Rob Bottin, who returned to work on a new, less cumbersome RoboCop costume. The RoboCop suit for this film was constructed purely of fiberglass. This allowed Peter Weller far more freedom in terms of movement and gave the suit far more metallic look. He must have been like, is fucking Verhoeven on this shit again? Probably not. He was probably happy to come work on it without having to deal with
I mean,
whatever.
as an effects guy, it's a cool gig, right? I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah.
And
this-
I feel like this one had more of a purple sheen too. They amped up the purple, I think,
Yeah.
on this one.
Yeah, that little burnt chrome look.
Yeah.
I like it. It's definitely a little bit. It's more comic booky, if anything, for sure. And there were actually metal pieces on the original armor, so that shit, like, not only was it heavy and unable to move, so you definitely can see the results. There's a lot more fluidity to RoboCop in this film, which is cool. Which is one of the things I give it kudos for, because he looks amazing on screen.
Yeah. And I think the suit is a little better. You know, like from Ninja Turtles 1 to 2, the suits got better.
Yeah.
If everything else got a little worse. Like,
Yeah.
I think that just happened a lot at this time period.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if they made a big splash and you get a bigger budget, so you can kind of dump a little bit more into the way that they're producing it.
And from the effects side, the R&D is mostly done. It's just a matter of they just tweak it. You know, it's a matter of just really fine tuning from 1 to 2. So I think that really just having that extra time helped out a lot. You know.
Yeah, for sure. And on this one, they were kind of met with the same deadline that everybody else was. So just having the knowledge of the first one seemed to come in handy, at least with the RoboCop suit.
Right.
Animation legend Phil Tippett would return with his motley team of stop-motion puppeteers, which at the time it was really hard to find stop-motion animators because you didn't have the films of Tom Selleck or Leica yet, so you didn't have like very many trained stop-motion animators to pull from. So Phil Tippett just called everybody he possibly knew who ever did anything with stop-motion to come work on this film with him.
Nice.
And the puppeteers would handle much of the effects direction, as the stop motion process was used heavily in the creation of RoboCop 2, Kane himself, not particularly just the movie, but a lot of stop motion animation in this one, more so than the first one. RoboCop 2 is the new cyborg baddie threatening order in old Detroit. The effects art director Craig Davies joined Tippett and led a team called the Monster Crew in the design of the frightful new creation. At the time, they didn't know what they were in for, so they had to design a versatile life-size armature of the head and torso for close-up shots of Robo-Kane, as well as unconventional and scale armature puppets for the stop-motion scenes that were said to slice up the animators due to all their many moving metal parts. Those models
shit.
on YouTube, you can check those models, and Phil Tippett does like a later interview. He's older, and these effects people come in and they interview him or whatever, and he talks about working with the puppets and stuff, and apparently like moving these armature or these little models around, especially this one in particular, the ball socket joints that they use, they keep them pretty tight so they hold a very precise posture. So they were saying that when these guys were animating, they'd have to like put some elbow grease into like maneuvering this thing, and people were just getting sliced up left and right. So the RoboCop 2 armature in of itself was somewhat of a villain in the behind the scenes, fucking people up.
Wow.
They knew the monster had to be formidable and something RoboCop had little chance to defeat. Craig Davies states, I wanted to do something that was more animal than human, like a Brahma bull combined with a locomotive. We went through a lot of animal shapes, but Tim Hunter, who was still on the film as director at that point, thought it should have more of a human appearance because human beings are the biggest monsters of them all. That was his thinking, and I think he was right, says Craig Davies. What do you guys think of that? That sounds like I think it's kind of true-ish, monsters, we always see that allegorically portrayed in films and such. But it seems like a kind of pretentious thing to say.
It is. I mean, I like the idea of it. I just don't think that's what it came across.
Yeah,
right, yeah,
I agree.
yeah. And the final design was meant to look like a cross between an angry bodybuilder with a medieval knight. And
That skipped leg day. Skinny ass legs, man, just doesn't work. The Ed 209 so much better, man. This is just I don't know. CG face too, it's just like.
Oh, I love the Lawnmower Man animation in it.
It's
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I feel like there's
I'm a Vander on this.
I don't know what it would be. I don't know
For
what
sure.
it could be, but it's just not quite as good. There's just so many better robot designs, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know.
Part of the reasoning behind some of the design too was they wanted a really small torso so it looked like hornet-like or insect-like. They felt, I guess, at the time that was scary looking. I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me too much, but
It's terrible.
but the legs are a little skinny. I don't mind the RoboCop 2 design, to be honest.
I do. My favorite scene in this movie is when they're showing the other RoboCop 2s
Same.
and they can't handle it
So
and they
great.
die.
So great.
Oh,
That's probably
yeah,
my
that is
favorite
pretty
scene out of
funny.
the whole thing. I could have gone through 2 hours of just them unveiling different robos.
Yeah.
Miniature stop motion models of RoboCop 2 were used for most of the shots. 8 separate miniature teams had to work around the clock to meet the tight production schedule. For close-ups, the full-size head and torso, weighing almost 800 pounds, were operated with long poles attached to the areas that had to move. That's crazy. Phil Tippett's talking about this in one of the interviews, and you see all the parts on the table, and you see the torso, kind of immediately assuming, without knowing, that it's maybe like fiberglass or some kind of fabrication, like, oh, this is like great paint job. But all these pieces were heavy metal. So these guys are like, again, it's like super dangerous. They have a hydraulic system for under the torso that would make it thrash around in close-ups and stuff. And during their R&D, the thing was thrashing, and one of the arms swang over and hit Phil Tippett in his chest and broke one of his ribs.
Whoa. Jesus.
Yeah. So it's like crazy. If I were, I don't really know because I'm not an effects guy or whatever, but I guess I would have tried to make that thing a little bit more of a fabrication as opposed to like
Yeah.
spot on heavy metal, but they did what they had to do.
Right.
The different RoboCane puppets had to be tuned every day before animating could begin, which involved going over every joint and adjusting the tension, which was always different depending on which animator was using it. It also had slightly looser joints toward the end of each limb, so hands could be manipulated without disturbing the rest of the limb. Moving on to some of the visual effects, Peter Curran of Visual Concept Engineering was brought on to create the RoboVision effects as he did on the first film. There's a scene in the film where we can see the directives programmed into RoboCop listed off. Some that are appropriately mundane and innocent, like Directive 254, encourage awareness. Directive 278, seek nonviolent solutions. Directive 273, avoid stereotyping. And others that are more funny, such as Directive 245, if you haven't got anything nice to say, don't talk. Directive 247, don't run through puddles and splash pedestrians or other cars.
Recognize your white privilege, even though you're pretty much dead.
That could have turned up as Curran shoehorned in Directive 262, avoid Orion meetings. Which got
really?
him, yeah, it got him. It made the release of the film, but it got him into a little bit of hot water. And from then on, he did the effects. He did the same thing for RoboCop 3, and they made him submit everything he was going to do for approval after the fact.
That's hilarious.
Which is pretty good.
I will say the PG RoboCop that we get in a few scenes in the middle is probably some of my favorite stuff, just from a comedic standpoint. It's hilarious.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
definitely. That stuff's good too. Like I could watch more of that. It kind of it pushes way off base, but it is really funny. In the scene where RoboCop was being reprogrammed by Dr. Fax, the following hex numbers scroll quickly up the screen: 50, 45, 54, 45, 20, 4B, 55, 52, 41, 4E, 20, 49, 53, 20, 41, 20, 47, 52, 45, 41, 54, 20, 47, 55, 59. Converted to ASCII text, it reads, Pete Curran is a great guy.
Wow.
So a majority of the special effects in the film were done in terms of the battle scenes and stuff like that. Outside of the practical stuff they did, like gunfire and explosions and stuff, a majority of it was stop motion. So that rested heavily on Phil Tippett's team to get done. There was also some electricity animation when RoboCop goes to grab the electrical box to reset himself. I forget exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And that was hand animated by a guy's name who I don't remember, so I don't even know why I'm mentioning it, but good job, dude. I'll
That's
shoehorn
such
it in
a
there.
old school, not that old school, but like a comic book thing to do at that time. Like, just electrify him. It'll reset his mainframe.
Oh,
you
right,
know?
yeah.
It
Yeah.
seems so overly simplified,
easy.
but it's like, yeah, well, fuck it, whatever. You know?
Every
It's like,
time I
it's
try it,
okay.
I just get more confused and ornery and thirsty.
Yeah, right.
I like that hand animated, hand painted energy effects that turned up in like old films like Last Dragon and shit. To me, that shit looks magical. CG's great, but it's CG and that kind of thing. Just, there was actually a lot of the effects guys talking about their work on this, because most of them were stop motion guys, talked significantly about how like CG's bullshit, and even though some of this animation looks a little like stop motion animation, it still gives it a tangible, lifelike feel that I personally agree that it injects the scenes with
Do you think that if like
believability.
really younger millennials, if they saw something with miniatures, they would be like, why is it moving like that? You know
Totally,
what I mean?
yeah.
Do you think that they kind of wouldn't get it?
The dumb
Like-
ones would. Hopefully
Yeah,
the
okay.
scholarly millennial film buffs are like, oh, actually, that's stop motion animation, and it's actually a really classic way. But it's the other ones. So yeah, probably I'd agree with that. There's probably some that are just like, what is this? It's stupid.
So true.
So filming of the production, filming was done on location in Houston this time around instead of Dallas as a stand-in for old Detroit. Davison found that the city was much more cooperative than the previous location. Davison remembers, we found that they were very reticent to close down the streets for us in Dallas or let us do our pyrotechnics. They were just not helpful when it came to our action sequences. Houston promised us a lot of assistance, and they came through. They were enormously cooperative, letting us do things that would have been very difficult to do elsewhere. Director Irvin Kershner, affectionately known as Kersh on set, was known to be a pretty intense guy. Miller was toiling away on rewrites as filming was now underway, and when the pages got to Kersh, crew members were witness to the director tossing the new pages over his shoulder one by one, stating audibly that each was shit. While Frank Miller looked on mournfully. Poor guy. But, it's somewhat understandable. Irvin Kershner was pretty powerful in Hollywood at this point, having just done Empire Strikes Back. And also being brought onto the production so late, he didn't really have much input. So this was like really what he was able to express. And it was a lot of like writing as the filming was going, especially in the early days of the production.
That would drive me crazy. Like I don't know. I could not deal with new pages coming in during production. If I was director, I could not deal with that, man. I would need to have
Right,
my
I
pre.
see.
I liked Hitchcock style where creativity is done by the time you start shooting. Like you're creative before you start. Get it all planned, and then just shoot that pre-planned creativity. You know what I mean?
Do the work.
Yeah,
totally.
this whole I don't know, man. I mean, there's something to be said about being organic during production, but I just like I don't know. I feel like it's more often than not it's kind of a minus.
Yeah. The
I don't
stuff
know if
I've
that's entirely true with films.
It really depends on who it is and whose
Yeah.
hands it's in, because some people are able to kind of pull off stuff in that 0 hour and actually make the film much better and have those kind of serendipitous moments that add to the film, that, you know, things that weren't on the page. I totally get where you're coming from because I know you.
It's just it's a whole company. Like a movie is a company, and like you're changing everybody's schedules on a dime because we got new pages in. It's just I don't know, man. I just don't look well upon it.
There are pictures of Frank Miller sitting in the corner on sets and stuff, just cranking out pages. I guess
Jesus.
the first few weeks or so, Kirshner, Waylon Green, and Frank Miller were just like changing and changing and changing. There's so much changed. A lot of scenes that were in the script that didn't end up in the final version of the film, but certain elements that were re-picked and cherry-picked and then put in the film. So there's a lot of confusion and back and forth. Definitely writing well on set and definitely writing in the edit. Despite all that,
we were taught at SCAD, a film is written thrice. Once on the page, once while filming, and then once in the editing room.
and then now once by the internet fans. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, a fourth rewrite.
Or it ends up happening. Yeah.
And then
And
a
after.
fourth time using hashtags.
Yeah. Despite all
Sometimes
that,
on podcasts.
Yeah.
Despite all that, Frank Miller showed up every day to set, even after his commitment was fulfilled, and even had a cameo as the meek Frank the Scientist, who freaking blows himself up after to destroy his laboratory full of nuke.
Is he wearing his fedora? Frank Miller's
No,
always
he's
wearing a fedora.
This is before his fedora days. He was still
His
actually
fedora
kind
stage.
of this is what his dashing youthful days
My lady.
where he was bright-eyed
My
and
lady.
bushy-tailed.
He'd be on
My lady,
Cringetopia now.
Yeah. I think his intentions as well were to learn as much as possible about filmmaking as he could. He probably didn't think, I mean, at this point, especially seeing Irvin Kershner throw his pages, he probably didn't think he was ever going to end up on a set again. So it seems like he milked that. And, I have never seen The Spirit.
It doesn't seem like he did any Hollywood stuff after the RoboCop movies until he was working with Aronofsky on that Batman script.
Aronofsky, and then he worked with Robert Rodriguez pretty substantially
of course,
on Sin City, and then he directed The Spirit, which, have you guys ever
Not
seen
good.
that? I've never seen it.
Yeah, seen it. It's not good.
Stamp. But who knows? Maybe he'll come hit us with another great film someday. I don't know. I still believe in
I
the
don't think
guy
that's gonna
in
happen.
certain ways. I feel like
No,
I would
that's
really not like him.
He's
at
doing
this
that
point, but-
TV show on Netflix, Cursed, I think it's called.
That's
the
right,
one that's
yeah.
like the gender bent King Arthur thing.
Right.
I tried to watch the
Yeah.
first epised.
Yeah.
Frank Miller's part of that?
Yeah. Surprising,
Wow.
right? 'Cause it doesn't seem like it's his type of thing.
Gender bent. Let me go watch Fox News.
Oh my god.
So the filming of this movie in particular was not as grueling or stress-inducing as the first one, even though the first one turned out so great. This seemed to go like fairly smoothly, besides the workings of the director and the writers at the time trying to get things right. At a certain point, they had what they were going to shoot. They were ready. They had enough rewrites and stuff, and so they just moved along. So in research for this, there's not a whole lot of like crazy behind the scenes stuff. It was really it was a job, like you're saying. They were just showing up to work and finishing RoboCop 2 so they could get the hell out of there and move along. So didn't seem like there was a whole lot of confidence coming from the actors behind the scenes, as well as how much it infuriated Kirshner and John Davison to have to work under Orion's schedule and their constant input. But otherwise, the film, the principal photography and everything got shot and done and in the can, and they were already off. So it wasn't too big of a deal going and filming, it seems. The music this time around was done by Leonard Rosenman, who composed a completely new score for the film and did not reprise any of Basil Polidorus' themes from the first film, which I actually don't mind the music in this. I think it's like not bad, but without those themes, like it's a real.
It's like the when Elliot Goldenthal replaced Danny Elfman on the Batman movies, where it's just like, he came up with his own theme. Maybe it's not as good, but it's still a legit theme for that character. So I didn't mind it so much. I thought it was kind of cheesy in the end credits, though, when you start hearing the voices singing RoboCop. I was like, that's a little. We don't need that.
Yeah,
this isn't 60s Batman.
So, let me see. I got a little lost here. Did I cover what I wanted to? Okay, yeah. So the reception of the film, after all was said and done, was met with mixed reviews from critics and fans of the first film. While the special effects and action sequences are widely praised, a common complaint was that the film did not focus enough on RoboCop and his partner Lewis, and that the film's human story of the man trapped inside the machine was ultimately lost within a sea of violence. This film was also partially disliked by actors Weller and Allen, as they both thought it was a negative film to work on. In his review, Roger Ebert wrote, the first RoboCop was a thriller with a difference. This time around, he wrote, Kane's sidekicks include a violent, foul-mouthed young boy who looks to be about 12 years old, but kills people without remorse, swears like Eddie Murphy, and eventually takes over the drug business. The movie's screenplay is a confusion of half-baked and unfinished ideas. The use of that killer child is beneath contempt. He really hated Hobb.
Wondering how I must have felt about Hit Girl and Kick-Ass then.
Yeah. Oh, well, I wonder.
Yeah.
I remember watching this movie as a kid. I know I saw this one in the theaters, bish.
Oh shit.
I remember seeing this and thinking like how provocative Hobb was with his little lunchbox machine gun and his death and everything, and him swearing. I was like, oh my god, like I shouldn't be watching this. Like I'm a kid. This is not what kids do. He's a bad kid.
Wait, were you like, I could be doing this too as a child?
No way. But also there's the scene of the electronics store getting robbed by the Little League team.
Yeah.
And I remember just
I was
feeling
like,
like at the time, to me, that was kids. I was like, I shouldn't be watching this. These kids are mean and bad. And like, thought RoboCop was gonna shoot him. I don't know. That's what I was
Another
expecting.
super like comic booky moment where it's like a villain with his henchmen, but it's like a coach with his little
Right.
league team.
Right. It's like when,
so-
yeah, totally.
It was because he can't attack kids. It's actually really perfect.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
But it's just funny. It was just funny.
Yeah. Janet Maslin of the New York Times wrote, unlike RoboCop, a clever and original science fiction film with a genuinely tragic vision of its central character, RoboCop 2 doesn't bother to do anything new. It freely borrows the situation, characters, and moral questions posed by the first film. She further adds, the difference between RoboCop and its sequel is the difference between an idea and an afterthought.
Wow. Okay.
She also writes about Hobb, the aimlessness of RoboCop 2 runs so deep that after exploiting the inherent shock value of such an innocent-looking killer, the film tries to capitalize on his youth by also giving him a tearful deathbed scene.
Okay.
I'm like trying to feel bad for him, but I'm like, that kid's bad.
Yep.
That's a bad dude.
He sells drugs. Peter Weller also criticized the script, saying it lacked the spine and the soul of the original. Weller tried to convince Frank Miller, Irvin Kershner, and the film's producers that the third act needed a more morality angle instead of being just a shoot 'em up, but the producers felt the battle between RoboCop and Kane was sufficient.
It's pretty much like, I do want the action, of course, but I do think Weller's right here.
Yeah,
It's
agreed.
Yeah,
really what it's
totally.
missing. It's just missing that almost entirely, dude.
Yeah.
You know, I could just see Frank Miller being like, yeah, fuck that shit. You know?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if
Get
that was
some
really
guns.
him, in terms of...
You don't think?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the comic isn't really that much better in terms of the ending, but I don't know. It sounds more like, as it says, as Wolfie said, like the producers. Seemed like they were the ones who were pushing for that.
Yeah, and at the time,
I guess so.
all they wanted to do was hit their release date, and again, the action footage and the special effects are great. So it's just, I mean, it seems like, that was their driving force, apparently.
Also, was I the only one who was disappointed that when Robo's hanging from the building, he says, "You're coming with me, Kane," but doesn't say "dead or alive, you're coming with me"? I was like, wait a minute.
It never shows up.
I was like, what? You're
Also,
so
did I
close
miss
to the
it? Does he
perfect
ever
line.
say drugs or trouble? Does he ever say that line?
If he did, it
don't
might have been to the
remember.
Little League or something.
He
What
says
about
something.
drop it? Does he ever say drop it? I feel like I've heard those lines quoted from Friends, but I was looking out for it when I watched the movie, but I don't remember hearing it.
Drop It might have been in the first one. I don't remember.
Yeah, I feel
Maybe
like
so,
maybe in the
yeah.
first one, yeah. Nancy Allen was looking forward to doing the original script for the sequel under Tim Hunter's direction when Hunter was replaced by Irvin Kershner. Kershner completely changed the script and, according to Allen, took out all the intelligence and humor. She went on record in a Nucatel International Fantastic Film Festival interview in July 2010, 4 months before Kershner's death, saying that she hated Kershner and hated working with him, and quote,
man.
"And you can tell him that I don't care."
And that's why he
Is this
died.
like the Joss Whedon of the time?
It feels
he
like
made
it.
one
Saucy.
Yeah, it feels
one
like it.
amazing one, and then he was a tyrant the rest of the time?
Yeah.
Yeah. But early on, doing press in August of 1990, she said something to the effect, or she said, quote, "I hate comparisons between directors. I love Kirsch. He has great inspiration. He's very creative. He's a very considerate person that takes care of the details and the character."
It's like Ray Fisher and Joss Whedon. Yeah.
Yeah, very much. And it's like when you're doing press, like before the movie comes out, it seems like a lot of actors kind of like feel like they have to approach it in this kind of way.
They have to, yeah. That's part of the promotion.
Yeah. And then now she's like, "Fuck that dude. I'm glad he's dead." Just kidding. Mad respect. R.I.P. Kirsch. RoboCop 2 currently has a 35% positive reviews on the movie review aggregator site Rotten Tomatoes, with 20 out of 31 counted reviews giving it a rotten rating and an average score of 4.5 out of 10.
I told you all. That's what it is.
I'm
is
surprised
exactly
it's
why
that low.
I
I
asked.
thought I liked it a lot more than that myself, but
I
Not that
continue
it's
to
great.
Yeah, I will sing the praises of all three of these movies till my dying day, but for sure, when you're thinking of it and objectively.
seems like that
Perhaps.
first script is what they should have gone with, though.
So after the lackluster box office performance of the film, Davison had this to say: "I'm sorry that more people didn't like the picture. By the time you're finished with the whole movie making process, it's impossible to be objective. You work so hard on these things and you just hope that people like them, and when they don't, it's really depressing. The whole thing was ass backwards because the studio came up with the release date before they even had a story. It was like, we're opening in 2,000 theaters, kid, and you better put something on the screen on such and such date. As soon as that happens, the whole thing has gone to hell in a handbasket." So, after hearing all that, guys, do you have any closing remarks about RoboCop 2 that you'd like to express?
I think just as much as most of us here watch film and work in the film industry, we kind of know when a company goes, "You have to have something by this date," it's probably not going to be a good movie, because we've seen it time and time again when that happens. That being said, I love me some RoboCop, but RoboCop 2 is not my favorite of the RoboCop. When we get to part 3, I have way more praise for 3 than I do 2, even though it's
All right.
less.
Really?
It's
Wow.
pretty low budget, but I
Wow.
enjoy it more.
I got to agree.
But yeah, I like RoboCop. I wish some things would have been different in this one, but it was cool hearing what some of the behind the scenes stuff and just how the productions were different between this film and the first one. So this is cool. I'm glad that we're doing this RoboCop series, because it's a lot of fun.
Wait, I want to ask you now, though, if you could name one thing, what is the single worst thing about this movie? The kid or what?
It would be, two things for me is, I think if you're going to do a sequel and you're going to have a big bad in it, you got to make it look cool.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You got to have either something like, for me, it's like when Ben was saying, it's like, Arnold's Terminator versus the T-1000. It's like, yeah, that guy's skinnier and sleeker, but he has a cooler power. Like, it's
Right.
definitely an upgrade, even though he's not as big as Arnold. So, with RoboCop, I feel like because he's already big, you kind of got to go bigger for the most part. But I really would have like to have seen them do something that was a little more like it was a robot that looked human, because you kind of have RoboCop when you know, he can take his helmet off, he has a face, and you can you can kind of emote with that. And with Peter Weller being RoboCop, you know, he's so great as the character. To have something that was more man and machine like just I don't know, kind of like more like the Metropolis robot, you know, something like that, where it was all metal. There was no like, you couldn't emote, you couldn't see anything. It was just like, I don't know. But that, and then the kid thing I didn't like, and you know, it's something I talked about in the first one, was I wish there would have been more of him like struggling with him like losing his wife and kid, and something that I like in the remake version, because I think they handle it really well. And I wish there would have been more of that. And it's like, you have this badass sidekick, and you're like, all right, I guess she'll do something in this movie. Which was like, Murphy.
Right.
It's like,
right.
God, it's like, what a waste of a character.
Well, they showed the spine and the brain of that guy, right? The bad guy.
Yeah, really cool effect.
I really wish that they would have kept his brain and all that, like, I don't know, as more part of the design or something. Like, it's cool body horror kind of thing for the villain, and it's just so covered up with metal. And maybe they should have made like his eyes and like part of his upper face visible, but not his mouth, like kind of the opposite of RoboCop. You know, I don't know, maybe it's
like
too
a
cheesy,
Robo
but
Silver Samurai kind of thing.
Just like a reverse design.
Yeah,
and maybe make him gold, and definitely give him make him like you know, better legs. But anyway,
C-3PO murdering everybody in town.
Something like that, man. You know, I don't know. There's just I agree that the design's not super great, but I think Ben. Sorry, you're done, right though, Maddie?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
go ahead.
Ben's got to go soon, so.
Oh yeah.
I guess onto my thoughts then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's see. I think it's weird to me that like I like the first one a lot, and then looking at the sequels as well as the comic, as well as like some of the ideas for other stuff, I'm just like, maybe I just like this better as a standalone movie than an actual franchise. I don't know, because like I'm not too thrilled with any of the stories that have come after it that they've made. And also maybe it did. I mean, I haven't really seen the TV show. I know it didn't last very long. Maybe it works better in the TV show format. I was just thinking that, you know, one of our favorite moments is when it's the PG, you know, the very G-rated Robo going on. Like, that's awesome, but you can't do a full 2-hour movie with that, because then it's going to get old. But it could work as a 1-hour episode. That would work.
Yeah.
So maybe I would prefer it as a TV show. Maybe not necessarily the TV show they made, because I haven't seen that, and it didn't last very long. But who knows? But I think it's a shame that it didn't live up to the original, but it is kind of... It doesn't really surprise me either, given the stuff that Wolfie's laid out for us in terms of the history of the production, as well as just the difficulty of trying to match up with that, because he already got his revenge. In the first one, he already reclaimed being Murphy in the first one. So it's like, well, where do you go from here outside of just more villains?
Space!
Yeah, more.
No, just kidding.
More other stuff for him to encounter. I did find, all right, since I keep bringing up the Batman connections, I did find an interesting connection where when they go after Officer Duffy, and they slice him open and stuff. And Angie's like, I thought you were just going to scare him. I was like, that sounds familiar, because in Batman Returns 2 years later, Catwoman says the same thing to Penguin.
Oh, wow.
Right? And then so Kane in this one, he's like, doesn't he look scared? And then in the Penguin in Batman Returns says something different. He's like, she looked pretty scared to me. But I mean, it's the same. It's the same sentiment. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize there was that similarity. And it's not like common enough of an exchange to be like a movie cliche. It's not like, you know, person's walked away and then the other person says the person's name so that make them stop, and they're like, thank you. Like all that type of cliche bullshit. You know, that you see that all the time.
I wonder if it's something that turned up in like a Miller comic, because wasn't Tim Burton inspired by Miller's work as well?
He was, but I don't really remember that line being in Dark Knight Returns or Year One, so... Who knows? It's a weird thing that I noticed, where like all the other connections kind of make sense in a weird roundabout way, but this one I was just like, that's a hell of a coincidence. That's interesting.
Right on.
So I'll end with that tidbit.
All right, Andrew, what are your final words?
Yeah, pretty much just what I already said. Design, agree with Maddie on that one. Could have had more heart. Agree with Weller on that one. And it's kind of surprising Irv that the Kirsch was seemingly kind of a douche on set,
Douche curse.
But I guess that kind of thing happens. But I mean, God, I'm really surprised that people had that low of thoughts on it. But I mean, I guess I kind of see. But yeah, I guess that's it, man. I don't know. It could have been better, but I enjoyed it. I'm glad I finally did see it. I haven't seen number 3 yet, but I'm sure I'll be getting to that soon.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see what your thoughts are. Since
Definitely.
I really enjoy 3 more than 2. So
Yeah.
And I love 3. I mean, I love them all, but I am excited to hear what you have to say about it. My final thoughts on RoboCop 2, besides anything else that I've said, I still really enjoy it. I still like watching it. I love the effects, love the costume. I actually like Robo Kane. I think he doesn't look too silly. Also, digging deep and seeing some of the effects work that went into creating that really make me like it a lot more. I like the screen that folds out of his face and has that, way early 90s CG in it. And the weaponry, and I like that it had 4 arms and stuff. But otherwise, the biggest problems for me are just, character, story, robbing it of that humanity and the morality play that we got in the first one. It is very much glossed over by the action, but that keeps me in it enough to still enjoy it. So, that's RoboCop 2, and it just suffered from, as the title suggests, creative wars across the board. It seems like this time around, the effects guys, they didn't have it easy, but they had it the most cohesively figured out.
yeah.
Yeah. So thank you guys again for joining me, talking about some cool movie shit. We love Robo, despite the flaws of this film. We'll be back with RoboCop 3 here soon enough. If you have any questions, inquiries, details you feel like we left out, email us at overlycriticalpodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/overlycriticalpodcast. And you guys got anything to say before we leave?
And also follow our Instagram on the broadcast of this podcast, the superhero stuff you should know. Follow our Instagram at superhero stuff pod.
Yeah, like Ben said, check out Superhero Stuff You Should Know podcast. And I'm Thunderwolf Drew on Twitter and Instagram. And just search for, Superhero Stuff You Should Know podcast on all the social media. That's it. Signing off. Bye.
Hell yeah.
This is Maddie. Bye-bye.
Ben signing off.
This is Wolfie again, signing off.
Signing off again.
Signing off more.
Just in case you forgot.
I want to sign off better than
Wolfie
you.
here.
If you like what you hear and want to support this show directly, go to patreon.com/overlycriticalpodcast and become a $3 scholar. You'll get a shout out on the show, a mention in our YouTube content, and the opportunity to pick a topic for the show. Also, please join our Facebook group at facebook.com/overlycriticalpodcast and get in on the conversation.